Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live story share episode of Cruising. This week, we're taking you to Nashville, Tennessee, inside the iconic lesbian bar there, Lipstick Lounge. Lipstick holds a special place in my heart as the last stop on our initial 2021 road trip. If you don't remember, that episode ended up really revolving around Lipstick as a non-denominational place of worship for those ostracized by their churches. And we also talked a lot about parents and the role they play in our journeys as queer people. We heard from Christa, one of the owners of Lipstick. We did not hear from her co-owner, Jonda Valentine, because she doesn't do interviews, which is totally chill. But you will hear a bit more about both of them in some of these stories. Folks shared about first-time lesbian bar adventures, rugby teams, transitioning and gender identity, and even opening night of Lipstick Lounge back in 2002. Unfortunately, our recording cut out at a certain point that night, and I just want to make it clear that any missing story shares from this event are truly not personal at all, and we are also really disappointed to not be able to air all of them. Now, we are first going to hear from a Nashville queer historian named Sarah, no relation. She was generous enough to prepare a slideshow tracing back the history of Nashville lesbian spaces. So in just a minute, you'll hear her full presentation.
All right, so back in the day, in like the 1960s, there used to be these gay travel guides, and one of the most famous ones that became really popular was Bob Dameron's travel guides, gay travel guides. And so looking through those, I was looking to see when is the first instance that Bob Dameron mentions lesbians at a Nashville gay bar. So in 1974 is the first time that I found something. And that would be The Jungle, apparently. The Jungle is actually one of Nashville's first gay bars. It opened in 1952. And then next door was Juanita's. And Juanita Brazier worked at The Jungle, then got her own liquor license, bought the place next door, and opened Juanita's in 1956. So those are our two first gay bars that we recognize. There's a historical marker for both of them out on Commerce Street downtown. So yes, this little, I know it's probably hard for some of you way in the back to see as well, but there's a little G next to The Jungle listed here. It says some G. The G stood for girls. Was that straight girls? Was that gay girls? I don't know. I'm going to assume gay girls for this since it was Bob Dameron's gay travel guides, but who really knows? Next slide. And then we get to Gaia's Guide. This is the first one that was published in 1975. This was exclusively a gay travel guide for lesbians. But what each of these travel guides always have, and it's like almost usually my favorite part, there's a key. They have all these different ways to tell you, is it a mixed bar? Are there lesbians? Is it kind of sketchy? Is it cruisy? So this is telling you what their key is. And if a bar has 5 stars next to it, that is all gay women and well organized. Well organized in this context means they have center facilities, probably with a library and a switchboard. Counseling and therapy are also available, and their activities are political as well as social. And then it gets, as you go down from 5 to 1, it gets increasingly less lesbian. So let's go to the next slide. This is what's appearing in Nashville in the 1975, the very first Gaia's Guide. Not a lot going on here. We do have a Nashville Women's Center. Shout out to them. The MCC, that's the Metropolitan Community Church. Maybe this might shock some of you, maybe not if you grew up here in the Bible Belt. The Metropolitan Community Church was a gay-affirming church that started here, well, it originally started in California in 1968. Nashville got its first chapter in 1972, and it actually was very critical for a lot of early gay 1970s activism in Nashville. Next slide. It's a little bit until there's a lesbian bar that was owned by a lesbian for lesbians. So in between, what were Nashville lesbians doing? There were other spaces they were able to hang out in besides the male-dominated gay bars. One place was Womankind Books. You might notice the logo of the butterfly is the inspiration for the logo for Nashville Queer History. Womankind Books was owned by Carol DeBraw Powell from 1977 to 1984. And it was a lesbian feminist bookstore that very much became a community space for gay and straight women. Women who were victims of domestic violence would walk in and feel like this was a safe place for them to share their stories when they couldn't share it with their families and they couldn't share it with police. Next slide, actually. Out of Womankind Books became the Womankind Support Project, and they also hosted a health center where women could go and learn about women's health care and get screenings and learn about abortion. Once again, this is the 1970s, so all of this is very much wrapped in the national women's rights movement that's happening at the time as well. And they also did, Womankind Books also hosted a lot of musicians out of the lesbian record company Olivia Records. They would do these women's coffee houses. And next slide. And then outside of places like Womankind Books, lesbians also very much hung out in their houses. Potlucks, this is a photograph of a 1975 lesbian potluck that was shared with me several years ago from a woman that we'll talk about later, ran the lesbian newsletter here. And then that image on the right is an invitation from Carol DeBraw Powell, who ran the bookstore, inviting people over for a party at her house. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in 1978, there was a new lesbian social political organization started. It eventually got the name the Nashville Women's Alliance. And once again, we are back to church. This is, you may recognize, because it looks exactly the same pretty much. This is the first Unitarian Universalist church down on Woodmont. This was a very important church, particularly for the lesbian community. From 1978 well into the 1990s, this Nashville Women's Alliance hosted many dances there. Their Valentine's dance, their Halloween dance, their spring fling dance, their winter dance, like every dance was at this church. It's also where they officially named themselves the Nashville Women's Alliance. In 1978, they had a dance and you could put a penny into one of the four choices, and Nashville Women's Alliance is the one that ultimately won out. Up here, this pile of paper that you might have noticed I plopped down before I walked up here, this is one issue of, this is issue number 5 of a newsletter. That was the very creative name the Nashville Women's Alliance came up with for their newsletter. It's just called a newsletter. And yeah, feel free to take one and look through it. It's really fun to look through and see what was happening in 1979 is what that's from. Next slide. For many years, I've been doing this research since 2021. And for a while, I thought I knew what the first lesbian bar was. And before I even get there, what is a lesbian bar? I assume perhaps maybe you answer this in your book and talk about it, but everyone in this room would probably have a slightly different definition. So I thought it was a place called the Women's Room for a long time, and you'll see why in the next slide. But Abby Rubenfeld and Gail Du Bois.
So Gail Du Bois was one of the owners of the Women's Room, now in her 80s. And Abby Rubenfeld is a local civil rights attorney that was really instrumental in the fight for gay rights in Tennessee. She is now in her 70s, and I'm assuming a big part of the Nashville lesbian community.
Abby Rubenfeld and Gail Du Bois recently said to me, no, it wasn't the first. The first one was Ralph's. And I said, okay, I'll go back and look through my sources and see what I can find. I can't figure out when Ralph's actually started. I've looked through property records. I've looked through newspaper articles. It definitely did exist before the Women's Room. It seems like the lesbian community at the time, at least the ones that produced historical records, did not consider it to be a lesbian bar. But some people like Abby and Gail clearly did. So that's the discrepancy that I have to deal with in the historical record, right? So, but I'm not here to tell I'm not here to tell Abby Rubenfeld especially that she's wrong in any way. So, yeah, she's always right. I try to get her here tonight to talk about this, but she trusted me apparently. And Ralph's, I can find, this is an ad from 1988. Ralph's existed well into the 1990s, and increasingly does appear in the historical record as a lesbian space. By 1988, it's being called, the Woman's Choice Bar. But it doesn't really appear in any of those gay travel guides or talked about much in like this lesbian newsletter until after the women's room opened. And now, for like a hot second, the canteen had 4 stars listed in the gay travel guide, meaning it was like super lesbian apparently. And then like a few months later in the newsletter, they were like, JK, we don't like that place anymore. So it gets dropped off the list all of a sudden the next year. So shout out to the canteen for that one moment. Someone clearly screwed something up and pissed off a lesbian, and you should never do that. Next slide. Now you might understand, for those who can't see, I'll read this for you. You might see why I got confused. This advertisement for the opening of the women's room says, now open, the women's room, Nashville's first and only women's bar. And so that is October-ish, 1980. Also, you might be looking at this saying, Sarah, that advertisement says the women's room, but you wrote the woman's room. Yes, this goes back to another fun historical thing. So most of the historical record, advertisements, people writing about it in the lesbian newsletter, wrote the women's room. But when you look at the property records and you ask Gail Du Bois herself, who ran it, she said, no, it was the woman's room. And I said, cool, I'm glad I've been using that wrong for years now. And I'm glad everyone else in the historical record also did it wrong too. This is really confusing and great. Nevertheless, it was one of the first lesbian bars. It existed for a very short time, about a year and a half before it switched to, next slide please. It switched hands and changed its name to The Parlor, and then also Slippo's opened. This is all on 8th Avenue South, so think of where Zanies is today, where Starland Vintage would be the actual building where the women's room was, and then Parlor. Slippo's was like next door, and then across the street, next slide, was a venue owned by closeted lesbian country singer Wilma Burgess. She first owned a venue called The Connection, and then she clearly changed the name to Track 9, and then she sold it fairly soon after to Zanies, and it's been Zanies ever since. Yeah, she was, unfortunately, because of reasons we can all assume, oppression, taboo, people in the country music industry, her agents specifically telling her, do not ever come out, it will ruin your career. She was very closeted for most of her life. A lot of her fans never even really knew much about her and her having a female partner until her obituary, where it mentioned, left behind by so-and-so. And even to this day, her partner doesn't really like to talk much about the relationship. It's a very hurtful thing for them, the shame that they still feel and the internalized homophobia that they have. But nevertheless, there is very few evidence, but evidence nonetheless, of Wilma being involved in the lesbian community as far back as the 1970s. She appears very, very little in the newsletter, and then I've been archiving Abby Rubenfeld's papers, and she appears a little bit in there. Actually, it wasn't until Abby let me start looking through her stuff just a few months ago that I finally realized Wilma owned the Connection Bar. For a long time, it was kind of a mystery to me. It was really hard to find any ownership records, but there was one singular letter from Abby to Wilma, thanking Wilma for donating to a fundraiser for the Tennessee Gay and Lesbian Alliance, and the address was The Connection, Wilma Burgess. And I was like, oh my God, she owned that. Like, I never knew. I never made the connection. And then we flash forward, and there's the 90s, and you start to see, as perhaps you mentioned in your book, this like slow disappearance of both lesbian and gay bars. It's like a double-edged sword of acceptance that happens. It starts to happen in the 1990s. But in, the early 2000s, Lipstick Lounge opens. These are some of the earlier ads. Do you remember these? They're like standing up.
Well, there's actually one right there.
Oh yeah, look at that. It is right there.
That was in one of the hotel books.
Oh, that's fun.
Ties in downtown. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The other one was for the Nashville Sea. Yeah.
Yes, I think these are both from the Church Street Freedom Press, which was a short-lived gay newspaper in the 2000s. And I'll share briefly my little Lipstick Lounge story. I came out, I guess the kids would say now, late in life at the age of 25. And now, so I grew up in Gainesville, Florida. I don't really have like any strong queer connection to that space. I was closeted the whole time. I knew, like many of us, that I was different in some way. Had crushes on girls throughout my life, but didn't really know like the name bisexual or the name queer until I got to grad school. And I moved up here in 2014, and that's the first time I said out loud, I am bisexual, to my graduate school cohort, and they went, cool, that's great. And then we moved on to the next thing, which was actually really fine with me. They've been lovely. Many of them are still my friends to this day. But the Lipstick Lounge was the first gay or lesbian bar I ever entered. And I'm 35 now, came out at 25. I actually didn't come to Lipstick Lounge till I think I was 31. So I went, a good 6 years without really venturing out into the gay nightlife scene. And even then, my first visit here was for Sunday brunch. It was not for a nighttime karaoke show or anything like that. And yeah, it's been such a great, lovely community space. Thank you to Christa and Jonda for running it and keeping it open all of these years. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this space with all of you for many, many years, and looking forward to listening to some of your stories tonight. Thank you.
Well, hello, y'all. So I'm Christy. I'm a recovering straight person. No, just kidding. My wife, Christa, is one of the owners of Lipstick. Y'all can cheer. She's amazing. So, 24 years, long time. I will say I moved to Nashville in 1997. Had no idea I was gay. We can skip softball, flannel, all of that stuff. They should have told me. The fact that I thought my female teachers were hot. I mean, there were signs, but, nonetheless. Come up, go to Belmont, work in the industry for a while. Every gay bar I went in at that point in time, I had been to the Jungle. Definitely been to Connection. All those, it was with my gay guy friends. I was the fag hag, right, as they love to call me. Little did they know. Little did I know. So fast forward. I start dating my first girlfriend. This is before Lipstick opens. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not gay. I just happen to like this one girl. Sure, yeah, that's the easy sauce to get there, right? And so fast forward, we come in. I meet Jonda. I was the general manager of the downtown Kinko's, if y'all remember those from back in the day in Nashville. And Jonda comes in to get some printing done. And so I get to know this space as the paint is going on the walls before the place even opens. I'm here at the soft opening, and then here on opening night. And this hot woman comes back around the booth, and she's bringing me drinks. I'm like, she's got drinks, and she's hot. I'm putting a $100 bill in her boobies. And I did. I put a $100 bill in her boobies. I was 23 years old. I will be 48 this year, if that tells you anything. We'll just say I had to wait for the other $700 bills that she got that night before my $800 bill to get my chance. But we became the best of friends, and I got to grow up in this space. So it was really interesting when the Lesbian Bar Project happened and this whole resurgence and this new focus on lesbian bars occurred. We had to close in Nashville. It was really, really difficult to be open in this space with the limited capacity and to make it make sense to make enough money to open the doors for just electric and staff for the amount of people we could have in here. So fast forward to when we finally get to reopen after COVID. And I'm sitting at that table right there. And I'm telling the story of when I first started coming in this bar and learning who I was. You know, sitting at the bar and bringing my ex-boyfriend in after the first girlfriend didn't work out, and Christa looking at me and going, "Christy Dennis." And I said, "Christa Sapea." And she was like, "You're in the 98th percentile of gay. You need to just hop on over." But fast forward, many years later, sitting at this table, right after, we opened after COVID. And I'm telling the story of, hey, when I was 23, turned 24 in this bar the month it opened, I said, I used to sit up here with, it was the owner's table. People love to call it the mafia table, which I always thought was so silly. And I was like, but back in the day, Jonda would sit there with all of her friends. And we called it, the Owl's table. It was the older, wiser lesbian table. And I'm telling this whole story, and I start looking around the room, and I'm like, oh, shit. Because now that was me. Because I was literally a year older than Jonda was when she opened the bar, sitting at that table when I'm telling this story. And I'm looking at all the late 20s, early 30s-somethings that are sitting out in the bar, and I'm like, how fucking cool is that? That I got to see the cycle, that this space remained relevant. And it speaks to what you guys are doing, and that regardless of the gentrification, regardless of the fact that, if you look back into the 60s and 70s versus where we are today, with there being a little bit more safety to being part of this community, the need for community and the need for safe space, especially in the South, is still very, very prevalent. So thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you guys for the work that you have done on this project. I'm super proud of my wife. I'm super proud of this space. It's a big part of what defined who I am at 48 years old, and I'm just glad to see it recognized in some other places. So thank you for the time. Thank you for being here today. Tip your bartenders.
I could tell you a story about my first gay bar experience or the first time I was here. What are we feeling? What are we vibing? Okay, I'll make them quick. I came out in college. I came out to an amazingly supportive family and community. Like, really only two weird friends were weird about it, and I was like, y'all are my friends. So everything was pretty, I was lucky in that regard. 2 years after I came out, I had my first girlfriend, who I thought I was going to marry and spend the rest of my life with, as we do. And I was studying abroad. I was in college. I was studying abroad. She cheated on me, and we broke up, and I came home for the summer. I was devastated. So my friend Caitlin said, "Girl, we're going to the gay bar." I was like, I've never been to a gay bar. So we're at my house getting ready. I'm like so nervous. Do you remember that feeling like your first pride, or like you're like nervous, like something's going to change, or like I was just like scared. And so we're getting ready, and my mom, who, jury's out on my mom, was like really interested in like, oh, you're going to a gay bar? Which one? And it was called Feathers, like classic gay bar name. It's the only gay bar in northern New Jersey. And so we're like, yeah, we're going to Feathers. She's like, oh, that sounds fun. When are you going? I was like, well, we're going to go pregame at Kate's house, and then we're going out to the bar. So she's like, okay, have fun. 2 hours later, I get to the gay bar, and my mom and her good friend Sue are sitting at the bar, like dancing. Yeah, mom and Sue. Mm-hmm. And I walk in, I'm like, and mom's like, hi. I'm like mortified, but also, yeah, I was mostly mortified. So I go on the dance floor, and my friend Kate is like, making out with gay guys. Kate's straight, but she was making out with all the gay guys. And I was like, yo, wing me. So she wings me, and I'm dancing with this beautiful woman. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm going to have a panic attack. This is so much fun. Let's go have a cigarette. And so we walk upstairs, and I see my mom, and I'm like, huh? And then I step outside, and we're smoking a cigarette, and there's a, gaggle of lesbians. And we start chatting with them as we're having our cigarette. And they're like, yo, did you see, like, there's like an older woman in there with like her girlfriend or something. Yeah, they're like sitting by the bar, and they're like drinking vodka tonics. Like, I talked to one of them, like they seem really cool. And I'm like, actually, that's my mom. And they're like, yo, you have the coolest mom ever. And so then I put the embarrassment away, and felt really grateful that my mom was there. So that's my first gay bar experience. But I'll make it quick. My first time here, my wife and I, we weren't married yet. We visited Nashville. We were living outside of Chicago. We thought we were pretty sure we were going to move here. We came down. We went to 3 Crow Bar, which is down the street. It's not there anymore. And then we didn't want to go back to our Airbnb. So we're like, hey, I think there's a gay bar right down the street. Let's go check it out. We walk in and we sit at that banquette, and this very electric seeming woman steps on stage, kind of shorter, white hair, crazy wacky glasses, and everyone's like really enthralled by her. And we're like, oh, she must be like, is she famous? We're in Nashville. It's Jonda. Jonda starts singing and she's ripping it. Like, she sounds so good. And at one point, pretty quick into the song, she turns and starts singing to me, right at this banquet. And I'm like, haha, like, cheers. Still kind of that nervous, like, oh, I'm in a gay bar. This, like, enigmatic woman is singing to me. And Courtney, my now wife, was like, hey, I think she likes you. I'm like, I guess so. So she comes over after her song and she just whispers in my ear. She goes, I really like your energy, your vibe. It's like, I saw you sitting there and I just had to sing to you. And she looks at Courtney. She's like, I hope that's okay. And Courtney's like, sure, you want to sit next to her? Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share a story about a queer space that I encountered. I came out a little bit later in life, too. I was just turning 30. But when I do the backwards math and think about, like, what were the signs, I can't help but remember the fact that when I was a teenager, I joined a walk-on intramural rugby team because I had a crush on the coach, Tammy. So set the stage. I was 16 when I started taking classes at a local liberal arts college. And I was this sheltered Christian teenager. I had never seen anything like what was happening on that campus. Punks, anarchists, queer people. But it was the women's rugby team that really drew my special attention. I just loved watching them walk across campus, the way that they like threw their arms around each other, just so unselfconscious, laughing, showing easy affection. And for some reason, I just could not tear my eyes away. So the religious trauma. I was raised evangelical, grew up in the suburban South, and my church had a lot to say about what women were supposed to be. Fragile, submissive, powerless, definitely straight. And as for me at that time, 16, it's not even like I felt like I was hiding something. And it's interesting to try and explain the complete lack of a question when it came to my queer identity, but I just had no examples for what that would even look like. My church was preaching the evils of same-sex attraction. When I was 12, on my way home from gymnastics, my dad said we had to stop by the store to buy toothpaste because we couldn't use Crest anymore. We were boycotting Procter & Gamble for promoting the homosexual lifestyle. And I remember being awed by all the ways that wickedness tried to reach us, even through our toothpaste. So examples of lives beyond heteronormativity, and especially happy ones, were just not on my radar. And it's really hard to imagine a future for yourself that you've never seen. So I joined the rugby team because my best friend, who I also had a crush on, and who would also later come out as queer, thought it would be fun. And it's really amazing the things I will do if a pretty girl asks me to. Our team was called the Fighting Quakers, and it was helmed by a small, fearsome woman named Coach Tammy. And with the bombast of a Baptist preacher, she exhorted us to run laps up and down the bleachers. One of our teammates, who was a femme lesbian who wore red lipstick to every single practice, stopped mid-stride, bent over at the waist, just wheezing, "I smoked too much weed for this." And over the next few weeks, I put almost no effort to learning the rules of the game. Instead, I studied my teammates like I was majoring in hot queer women and had an exam the next day. I was used to making myself as small as possible, but these women took up space. Theirs was a world without shame. They slapped each other's asses with sportsmanlike glee. They were strong, hairy, queer, powerful. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. the rugby women opened a door to a different world, one that challenged my view of what a woman was supposed to be and what I was allowed to want. It was both terrifying and electrifying. Our first tackling practice was in the pouring rain. The field was complete mud. Thunder was crashing overhead as we hurled ourselves into one another over and over, shoulder to hip, cheek to cheek, arms wrapping around thighs. I felt the full contact of female bodies against me, and I liked it. I'd spent most of my life shutting down instinct, but on the field, I leaned into the certainty of my body. I screamed as I ran toward my teammates, muffled by the roar of the rain around us. Rugby was one of the first and maybe only places where I allowed myself to experience my own power, my own body. All the things that I thought I had to be seemed to dissolve out on the field. After practice, we limped off the field together, streaked with mud like wild animals. Over the next few days, I remember just watching the bruises bloom on my body and thinking like, her elbow on my hip, her knee on my leg, the shadow of her hand on my wrist. Soon after, I graduated from high school and I said goodbye to the rugby team. I was off to finish my degree at a big SEC school where I would rush a sorority and attend football games in a sundress and tell no one about my days tackling women. But my time on the rugby team showed me briefly what it looked like for queer women to live unashamed, to build a world together, and to love one another. I think that at the time, and maybe even recently, I thought about queerness just as who you loved, who you had sex with. But I understood, now looking back on that experience, that queerness is also about the ability to imagine worlds beyond the one that we have. Jose Esteban Munoz, who's a queer theorist, talks about queerness is the thing that lets us realize this world is not enough and we have to imagine new futures. And in that moment, even though I wasn't fully conscious of it, I think I got a glimpse of a new future. So it's been nearly 2 decades since my time on the rugby team. It's been 5 years since I came out and started dating women, 1 year since I fell in love with a woman for the first time, and 1 week now since I last looked at Coach Tammy's Instagram. So a lot of life has happened between now and then, but I still remember the seeds of imagination that experience planted in me, and I still remember how to tackle. So if anybody wants to buy me a drink, we can give it a try after this. Thank you.
Hey y'all. This is more like a liminal space than a physical one, but this is on finally being seen as not a man. The Lucy Dacus concert. That's where I'm at. You guys remember? Where my ex-boyfriend studiously avoided acknowledging me 2 seats that way, and my ex-wife sat several rows ahead. Neither rows wearing rings anymore. I'm wearing a dress, my be gay, do crimes, hoop earrings. I feel brave being in the world in a way more femme presentation than I'm used to. Everyone around is queer, and I feel safe, even as I feel heartbreak and healing all at once, trying not to look towards the 2 people who I loved with all that I am. None of that's it, though. It's afterwards. My ex-wife and I walked together towards the parking structure we're both in. Rip the library parking lot. We're trying to be gentle to each other, and she's trying to make sure I'm okay after being near the ex-boyfriend, while trying to mask her own upset that I could be more upset about him than her. Polyamory is rough. That's not it either, though maybe that's affirming of being a messy queer. It's this. A woman walking alone out of the show has been walking in step with us, and as the crowd begins to disperse, she looks over and asks, "Can I walk with you? I don't want to go to my car alone." And we check she's going where we are and welcome her along. She thanks us and then tells us traumatic walks to her car stories that make her fear being a woman alone in downtown Nashville. Laughs them off as not being that big a deal. they're a big deal. Like assault, sexual violence, men. Tales of men and the danger of being a woman in public. And it's this moment of pains downplayed and safety found in packs. And I'm not a man to her. I'm safe to share the collective trauma. And I hate that that is the most affirming moment of my gender confusion. I love that I was seen as so not a man that I was safe to be near. And I fear I'll always carry that stain, no matter how I present, who I see myself as, how I feel. I'll always be man enough to cause real and valid fear.
Thanks for listening to Cruising. If you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It really helps others discover our podcast. Cruising is produced by a small but mighty team of 3 queer women, Rachel Karp, Jen McGinnity, and me, your host and editor, Sarah Gabrielli. Our theme song is by Joey Freeman. You can support us at buymeacoffee.com/cruisingpod. Follow us on social media at cruisingpod, on Substack, cruisingpod.substack.com, and at our website, www.cruisingpod.com.